Hey guys, tonight we wander slowly into a Victorian bedroom where the gaslight flickers like a tired eye refusing to close, and you are already awake when you wish you weren't. The curtains are heavy, the street outside murmurs with carriage wheels and distant footsteps, and the bed beneath you feels far too aware of your restlessness. You can almost hear the clock ticking through your ribs, each second a polite reminder that sleep has once again declined your invitation. Somewhere in the house, pipes cool and creak, and the night air carries that faint mix of coal smoke and soap, a scent that means evening, but not yet rest. You probably won't survive this, not in the sense of staying awake, anyway. If history has its way with you, consciousness is going down quietly before the hour is out. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, maybe drop a comment telling everyone where you're listening from and what the local time is for you right now. It's always oddly comforting to know how many sleepless minds are drifting together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You remain in that Victorian room, still in your second-person skin, still you, lying awake as so many did before electric light, before scrolling, before blue screens were blamed for everything. Insomnia isn't new, it just had worse wallpaper back then. Mainstream medical thought in the 19th century already recognized sleeplessness as a real condition, not just a personal failing, though plenty of people still treated it like one, a weakness of will, a moral wobble in the dark. The gaslight hisses softly, and you stare upward, noticing how shadows tremble along the ceiling. Beds are narrower than you'd like, mattresses stuffed with horsehair or wool, and the sheets smell faintly of starch. You try shifting to your side, then your other side, then flat again. Each movement feels louder than it should, like the night is listening. Somewhere in your mind, worry paces in circles, boots tapping against thought after thought. Victorians called this kind of night watchfulness, a term that sounds almost noble, as though you were guarding something instead of just staring at nothing. Physicians of the era wrote seriously about it. One widely accepted fact, even then, was that prolonged sleeplessness could lead to nervous exhaustion, digestive trouble, and emotional instability, what they broadly labeled neurasthenia. It was a catch-all diagnosis, and insomnia sat comfortably inside it like a cat that refuses to move. You feel the pressure of expectation, because in this era, sleep is not just rest. It's duty. Good citizens sleep properly. Moral citizens sleep properly. There's a quiet assumption that if you're awake, something about you might be slightly off. Historians still argue whether this moral framing made insomnia worse, planting anxiety in the very place meant to be calm. But in the moment, all you know is that the ceiling isn't offering answers. Outside, the city doesn't fully sleep either. Industrialization has stretched the day longer than the sun ever intended. Factories run early and late, trains run on strict timetables, and clocks, so many clocks, have begun to rule daily life. You are expected to rise at a precise hour, regardless of how the night treated you, and that knowledge hums in your chest as loudly as the gaslight. You try a slow breath, in through the nose, out through the mouth, something no Victorian doctor formally prescribed, but many instinctively did. The idea of sleep hygiene doesn't exist yet, but everyone has an opinion. And so swears by fresh air, a neighbor insists windows must stay shut to avoid night vapors, another recommends prayer, preferably long and sincere. You mentally rank these suggestions while remaining completely awake. A quirky fringe belief floats through the period that insomnia can be caused by excessive imagination, too much thinking, too much reading, too much inner life. Novels are sometimes blamed. So are intellectual women, political debates, and overstimulation of the nerves. If only you'd been a bit duller, the thinking goes, you'd be sound asleep by now. Comforting, really. You turn your head slightly, the pillow rustles. It's not especially soft. You wonder how many others have lain here, watching the same shadows, bargaining with the same minutes. Sleep is supposed to come naturally, like dusk, but tonight, it feels more like a visitor who forgot your address. The longer you wait, the more waiting itself becomes the problem. Anticipation tightening instead of loosening. Doctors write earnestly about calming the mind before bed. Avoid excitement. Avoid heavy meals. Avoid stimulating conversation. Avoid thinking about your own sleeplessness, which is a bit like asking you not to notice the fact that you're awake. Some recommend reading dull material, legal texts, sermons, accounting manuals. This might be the first recorded instance of boring history being prescribed on purpose. You imagine a Victorian physician, mustache neatly trimmed, speaking gently but firmly about routine. Bed at the same hour each night. Rise at the same hour each morning. Discipline the body, and the mind will follow. It sounds reasonable, and also deeply optimistic. Historians still argue whether such regimens actually helped patients sleep better, or simply made them feel more guilty when they didn't. Your eyes close for a moment, then open again. The darkness behind your eyelids is busy, crowded with half-formed images. Tomorrow's obligations. Yesterday's conversations. That odd thing you said years ago that resurfaces for no reason at all. The Victorians would say your nerves are overstimulated, stretched thin like overused piano wire. A faint humor creeps in, because at least you're not being treated with leeches. Not yet. Insomnia treatments get much stranger from here, but for now, you are simply awake in a room designed for sleeping, surrounded by objects that assume you'll comply. The bed waits patiently. The clock does not. You breathe again, slower this time. The gaslight dims just slightly as pressure shifts in the line. Shadows soften. This is only the beginning of the night's long conversation with itself. Ahead lie baths, notebooks, routines, and remedies, but for now, you remain here, suspended between day and dream, learning that sleeplessness has always been human. Even when the wallpaper was worse, you stay where you are. The bed unchanged, the ceiling still quietly judgmental, but the night deepens, and with it comes the sense that someone, somewhere, is very concerned about you being awake. In Victorian Britain, insomnia is not ignored, it is discussed, dissected, and gently worried over by men with notebooks, spectacles, and a sincere belief that sleep holds society together. You can almost hear them now, murmuring in consulting rooms and medical journals, agreeing that wakefulness is never neutral. Doctors fear wakefulness because it doesn't just steal rest, it steals balance. A mainstream medical belief of the time holds that the human body operates on delicate rhythms, and sleep is the reset button. Without it, nerves fray, digestion falters, moods sour. Sleeplessness is blamed for everything from headaches to hysteria, from poor work performance to questionable moral choices. If you're awake too often, the thinking goes, something inside you is slipping out of alignment. You imagine sitting in a high-backed chair across from a physician, boots planted on a patterned rug, the smell of ink and antiseptic in the air. He asks how long you've been sleeping poorly, and when you hesitate, he nods knowingly, as if hesitation itself is diagnostic. Insomnia is rarely treated as a standalone issue. Instead, it's woven into broader conditions like nervous exhaustion or melancholia. Sleep is the barometer, and right now, your weather looks unsettled. There's a quiet anxiety beneath the concern. Victorians are building faster lives than ever before. Trains collapse distance. Telegraphs collapse time. Factories hum before dawn. Doctors worry that the human nervous system, evolved for candlelight and seasons, is being asked to sprint indefinitely. You lying awake feels personal, but it also feels symbolic. One restless person at a time, the modern world might be unraveling itself. You shift slightly, the mattress answers with a muted creak. Even the furniture seems tired. Medical texts of the era advise moderation in all things, especially thought. Too much thinking, too much ambition, too much emotional strain, all are believed to overstimulate the nerves. Historians still argue whether this focus on restraint reflected genuine medical insight or simply cultural anxiety about change. But either way, the solution usually involves calming, slowing, softening. A fringe theory circulates quietly that insomnia is contagious in households. One restless sleeper, it's said, can disturb the nervous equilibrium of an entire family. This leads to recommendations that insomniacs be gently isolated, not punished, just repositioned, like a squeaky stair you haven't fixed yet. It's oddly considerate and faintly insulting. You picture doctors warning that persistent sleeplessness erodes character. Without rest, patience thins. Temper sharpens. Judgment slips. Sleep, therefore, becomes a moral safeguard, a nightly cleansing of the self. To fail at sleeping is to fail at self-regulation, at least a little. No pressure, of course. Your eyes close again, not in surrender, but in negotiation. You listen to your own breathing, hoping it will eventually trick the rest of you into following along. Somewhere, a physician might suggest avoiding late-night conversation, especially of an emotional nature. No arguments. No passionate debates. Definitely no existential spirals at 2 in the morning, advice that would have been helpful if minds came with off switches. There's also concern about dreams, or the lack of them. Dreamless nights are sometimes viewed as unhealthy, a sign that the mind never properly descends into restorative depths. Paradoxically, nightmares are also a problem, blamed on indigestion, guilt, or improper bedding. You can't win. Sleep must be just right, like porridge, but with consequences. You feel a faint irony settle in, because the more sleep is emphasized as vital, the more elusive it becomes. Doctors caution patients not to worry about being awake, while simultaneously listing everything that might happen if they don't sleep. Historians still argue whether this medicalization of insomnia created a feedback loop of anxiety, turning ordinary restlessness into a diagnosed condition, and lying here, you suspect they might be onto something. Outside, The city exhales. Inside, your thoughts continue their quiet pacing. The Victorian fear of wakefulness isn't cruel, it's earnest, even tender. Sleep is cherished because it's fragile. And tonight, as minutes slip past with polite indifference, you feel yourself caught in that same old tension, wanting rest, fearing its absence, and drifting slowly toward the remedies that promise to help. For now, you remain awake, observed by an age that believes sleep keeps the world upright. The bed waits. The night stretches. And somewhere between concern and care, the long Victorian attempt to cure insomnia gathers itself. For the next step, you linger in that strange, half-wakeful state, the world outside shrouded in darkness, while you remain an island of consciousness in an ocean of sleep. In this quiet moment, you think of the strange, tepid baths that once promised rest to those plagued by wakefulness. They weren't luxurious, not by any means. Tepid. Lukewarm. Not too cold. Not too hot. Just enough to convince your body it's time to slow down, to leave the nerves spinning in their anxious whirlpools and drift toward calm, though it always seemed like such an effort. Imagine yourself there, in a dimly lit Victorian home, slipping into the shallow warmth of a bath at dusk. The air smells of soap and wood, the room heavy with the smell of lavender-scented water or perhaps the faint whiff of rose petals, simple comforts, meant to coax the body into ease. The bath water is not hot enough to burn, but it isn't cold enough to awaken you with any kind of shock. It's exactly the temperature, the kind of middle ground that seems to promise something, but it's unclear if it will actually deliver. You sink deeper into the water, feeling it envelope your skin, each inch a gentle surrender. The practice of using tepid baths for sleeplessness is rooted in the belief that your body's temperature needed to align with nature's rhythms. Excessive warmth or coldness were thought to overtax the body, to further exacerbate the imbalance causing sleeplessness in the first place. The bath, in all its unremarkable lukewarmness, was supposed to promote gentle, easy relaxation. Not too aggressive. Not too indulgent. Just right. You can almost hear the advice floating up from another era. A warm bath before bed, nothing too extreme, nothing to upset the balance. The Victorians were obsessed with balance, with maintaining harmony between body, mind, and the natural world, and sleep was seen as the final seal of that balance. If you bathed too late, however, you risked waking up in the night, as your body temperature continued to adjust. But if you were careful, patient, just the right amount of warm, sleep might come. The debate about the exact nature of these baths is still discussed in some academic circles, though historians often point to the influence of cultural trends more than actual scientific validation. Was it the water that helped? Or simply the act of slowing down? After all, taking the time to submerge yourself in water, a ritual that would require attention, intention, and patience, could only slow the relentless pace of the modern world. And, perhaps more importantly, it gave the illusion of something working, even if it didn't always bring sleep in a timely manner. In many cases, it didn't. Still, for those who tried it, the bath became a nightly ritual, a prescribed moment of peace before the storm of thoughts took hold again. You feel the water shift gently around you, a silent companion. The only sound is the water lapping softly against the edge of the tub. And maybe, just maybe, a little part of you begins to relax, though the anxious whirring of your mind continues beneath the surface. Some believe that bathing in tepid water also improves circulation, helping the body to unwind in a more natural way. The skin, in contact with water of the right temperature, could relax its tension, leaving the mind to follow suit. Some insomniacs swore by it, while others found it utterly useless, though they'd never admit it, of course. Who wants to admit defeat in such a personal matter as sleep? The history of insomnia is filled with well-intentioned, often bizarre solutions, and tepid baths were just one of many. You can almost hear the voices of these early practitioners, carefully outlining the benefits of warm water against the worries of modernity. What you can't quite figure out, as you sink deeper into the warmth, is whether the bath was a genuine cure, or just another attempt to soothe an age-old problem that only grew more complicated as time passed. A strange thought passes through your mind. You could almost swear you've heard that the bath isn't supposed to be the only step. No, there's something else that follows. Something subtle but necessary. Perhaps a certain type of oil. Or the placement of pillows. Or a shift in bedding. Every step was believed to play a role, almost as though an intricate series of actions might unlock sleep like a door you've been trying to open all night. Historians still argue whether the practice was universally effective or simply a form of psychological reassurance. Sleep may have been elusive, but at least the ritual helped shape a sense of control. The bath was not an end in itself, but part of a larger picture, a small comfort in a world that demanded you remain productive, no matter how tired you felt. You settle in further, the water lapping softly as you wait for the final effect. But your mind continues its restless pace, no longer aware of the temperature of the water. You think of the other strategies, other strange remedies, that would follow in the footsteps of the bath. Perhaps tomorrow, you'd try a bit of warm milk before bed, or a walk around the block after supper. Both were favorites of insomniacs throughout the century, each promising its own brand of relief. For now, though, you remain in the warm bath, the water just below your chin. It's soothing, but not magical. The calm is momentary, fragile. But the night continues, as night always does. Whether you sleep or not, you sit there in the water, feeling the warmth slowly sinking into your bones. The bath seems endless now, the water more like a suggestion of relaxation than the real thing, and you can't help but wonder what your Victorian peers might have thought had they known you still haven't slipped into sleep. Maybe they would have suggested something else, another form of treatment, another cure, another ritual to try before the night is through. While you ponder, you can hear the echoes of doctors from the past recommending all kinds of remedies for sleeplessness. You imagine them scribbling furiously in notebooks, furrowing their brows as they puzzle out what might truly bring rest to the weary. Some believed it was the act of soothing the body, baths, massages, herbs, that would guide the mind into peaceful slumber. Others felt that it was a matter of avoiding excitable activities, particularly in the evenings. No debates. No stimulating conversations. Just gentle quiet and predictable routines. You picture yourself drying off now, wrapping up in soft towels as a breeze stirs gently through the half-open window. The night is still, save for the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant clang of a carriage wheel on cobblestone. The room feels quieter somehow, but the bath didn't seem to pull you any closer to sleep, not quite. You wonder, for a moment, how many others, those who turned to the same methods, found themselves in the same silent moment, hoping for the same gentle fade into sleep that still seems elusive. The routine of bathing as a cure for sleeplessness is not just about the water. It's about creating a consistent and soothing atmosphere, the Victorian solution to the frantic energy of modern life. In an era where the pace of the world was quickening, factories clanging, telegraphs clicking, trains speeding past, there was little time to simply slow down. And when sleep became scarce, the answer was always the same: slow it down. The bath, the soft lighting, the quieting of the senses were supposed to be antidotes to the world's demands. But you find yourself still awake, your thoughts drifting like the bathwater swirling around your ankles. Historians still argue whether this slowing down actually made a difference, or if it was all just a slow-motion dance to delay the inevitable. Did the calm of the bath bring any true relief, or was it just the quiet nature of the ritual, the act of preparing for sleep, that offered the most comfort? Perhaps, in the end, it was the effort of creating an environment for rest that brought its own sort of peace. One of the strangest things you might have heard about in the period is the use of aromatic herbs and oils, added to the bathwater, which were believed to have calming effects. Lavender was a favorite, often used to soothe both body and mind. Some doctors of the time swore by it, suggesting that its subtle fragrance could lower the heart rate and prepare the mind for sleep. Others preferred rosemary, thinking it might sharpen the mind for the day ahead, but for tonight, it's the lavender that lingers in the air. Even the scent seems to hold a kind of promise, offering the gentlest assurance that perhaps, just perhaps, rest is near. You wonder how many people, in this quiet, candlelit room, sat with their thoughts just like you, trying the same methods, hoping that something would work. Whether they'd tried the bath, whether they'd sat there in the same frustrated silence, waiting for the world to fall into a quieter rhythm that didn't quite come. It's a universal experience, this dance with insomnia, though it felt different for every person. Some believed in it wholeheartedly, and others, like you, began to suspect that perhaps the cure wasn't so much about the water or the herbs as it was about simply surviving the restlessness. Historians still argue whether this obsession with sleep hygiene, with all the strange and varied remedies, was a genuine attempt at finding relief, or whether it was simply the result of a society so accustomed to solving problems with rigid, methodical solutions. The obsession with routine, with controlling sleep like some sort of sacred ritual, seems both necessary and deeply puzzling when viewed through the lens of time. In that Victorian world, where the pressure to perform was constant, sleep was the final frontier of personal discipline. But tonight, as you sit there with the lingering warmth of the bath fading, you can't help but notice how strange it all seems. It's not a matter of being physically tired, or even of being overwhelmed by the constant push of the day. No, it's more like the body simply cannot find a way to settle, and no bath, no matter how carefully prepared, seems to make that happen. You glance out the window at the faint outline of the city beyond, thinking about the relentless march of time. The streets outside are quieter now, but it's not the peaceful silence of sleep. It's the silence of waiting. You wonder what will come next. Will the bath prove enough to relax your body? Or will you reach for another method, perhaps a warm drink, maybe a simple walk around the block to calm the mind? The world of Victorian insomnia cures was a world of trial and error, each new treatment becoming its own little promise of relief. For now, you remain in the stillness of your own room, thinking of all the other restless souls, just like you, drifting between sleep and wakefulness, and wondering what other tricks the night has to offer. You rise from the bath, still damp, and begin the familiar process of drying off, but there's an unshakable sense that the night will not fall easily, no matter how many rituals you complete. The soft, lingering scent of lavender fills the room, almost too subtle to pin down, like a memory that refuses to surface fully. You turn toward the bed, but instead of crawling in, you find yourself at the window. It's not yet late enough to call the night complete, but it is dark enough to sense the weight of the hours slipping by, leaving you with only the quiet pressure of wakefulness. In the Victorian era, insomnia wasn't just a problem, it was an opportunity for people to try all sorts of remedies, hoping to find something that would work. The tepid bath was only one part of the story. After all, they were living in a time when sleep itself seemed elusive. Their entire understanding of rest was framed by both fear and fascination, and every home had its own set of sleepy rituals. Some recommended a hot drink before bed, though not the sweet, frothy concoctions we might imagine today. No, the drink of choice was often something more utilitarian, like warm milk or weak tea. These were supposed to help calm the nerves, easing you into a sense of comfort before surrendering to sleep. And it makes sense: warmth, softness, familiarity. The act of drinking something soothing in the evening felt like one more way to assert control over the unruly night. You close your eyes for a brief moment, imagining the warmth of a cup held between your hands, the slight scent of milk mixing with the cooling air. If you were truly in the heart of the Victorian world, perhaps you'd be served such a drink by a quiet servant, who would leave you with a soft promise of sleep, even as the mind refused to cooperate. Yet, just as quickly, you return to your present moment, where the clock ticks in the background, still the most persistent reminder that time is slipping by and sleep remains stubbornly out of reach. It's funny, you think, how these rituals, while meant to soothe, only seem to underline the problem. The more methods you try, the more you fixate on the thing you're desperately trying to avoid, the fact that you can't sleep. Historians still argue whether these home remedies were truly effective or if they simply acted as distractions. Were they genuine cures, or just ways to make people feel better about their sleeplessness? As you stand by the window, you can't help but wonder about the subtle ways in which these solutions were all about the illusion of control. In a world where time was becoming more structured, more industrialized, and less forgiving, sleep became one of the few uncontrollable elements of life. It was almost as though people tried to regain control over their bodies through ritual, through gentle promises that tonight, sleep might finally take them. You step away from the window, your thoughts swirling around the concept of control. The Victorian obsession with routine and discipline was rooted in more than just physical health, it was about social order. If you could control your body's rhythms, you could also control your place in the world. The success or failure of a sleep remedy was as much about personal discipline as it was about the physical outcome. A quick glance at the time shows you that more hours have passed than you care to admit, and with a sigh, you move toward the bed once again. The linen sheets are cold, though they will warm soon enough, and as you slide under the covers, there's a feeling of quiet surrender. In the darkness, your mind drifts to the countless others who have occupied this same space between wakefulness and sleep, wondering if their own rituals have brought them any closer to rest. It's almost as if the bed, the sheets, the pillow all promise something, yet, still, they do not deliver. The Victorians were hardly the first to try and find a cure for insomnia. The human quest for sleep has always been filled with strange remedies and bizarre solutions. But what they had was a growing sense of urgency. The pace of life was accelerating, and sleep, in their eyes, had become the final defense against the march of progress. In their attempt to tame the night, they used everything they could: herbs, oils, teas, even the temperature of the water they bathed in. In many ways, their solutions feel quaint today, simple even. Yet, you can't help but notice how familiar they are. In a world of overworked minds and overstimulated bodies, the desire to control sleep remains just as strong. The tools may be different, but the fundamental desire to achieve rest is the same. You close your eyes, feeling the weight of the sheets settle against your body, and while sleep still eludes you, there's a softening in your chest. Perhaps it's the ritual itself, the quiet insistence that one has done all that can be done. The world outside is quiet now, the city a mere hum in the distance. All that remains is you, here, on the edge of sleep, ready to drift, yet still waiting for that moment when everything simply falls away, when the world becomes still enough to let you rest. There's a stillness now. It's almost too quiet. You're tucked beneath the covers, the lavender-scented air now fully replaced by the soft scent of linen. The quiet hum of the outside world seems miles away. No more factory whistles. No more train schedules. Just the faint buzz of gaslight and the slow, patient passage of time. The clock on the wall ticks, each second is soft as a whisper, but it feels louder in your mind than it does in the room. You try to settle into the softness of your pillow, adjusting it just slightly as your body adjusts, too. But sleep, like the rest of the Victorian remedies, remains just out of reach. Still, you remain, breathing slowly, gently, trying to trick the mind into following the body's natural rhythm. There's an old Victorian custom you might have heard about. People would often place a piece of paper beneath their pillow, sometimes with a note on it. Some thought it was a way of coaxing the mind into calm, others said it was a superstition. Either way, it was part of a larger pattern of quiet rituals people used to battle insomnia, this desperate sense that if you could just make the world softer, slower, you might find rest. You begin to drift just slightly, thoughts coming and going like waves breaking softly on a distant shore. But then the mind stirs again, a flurry of questions you can't quite ignore. Why do you remain awake, despite every effort to calm yourself? Historians still argue whether the physical act of trying to sleep, as Victorian society demanded, was actually what contributed to their insomnia. Or did it make it worse? The modern world, with all its time-saving devices and the proliferation of clocks, has made it far easier to overthink the passage of time. For many, the simple act of trying to sleep was part of the problem. You've been trying, too, haven't you? Trying to relax, trying to follow the prescribed patterns, trying to fix your body's refusal to rest. And in the process, you've added to your own restlessness. It's like the more you chase sleep, the further it runs. The Victorians thought about this too. They even came up with the idea of the sleepless mind. This was a state of mind they believed to be overactive, feverish even, and it was often treated by prescribing routines, like specific sleep schedules, and methods, like writing down your thoughts before bed. The idea was to remove the mental clutter before sleep could arrive. The purpose was clear: to restore balance to an otherwise chaotic, overstimulated mind. And if one method didn't work, there were always others to try. One popular trick involved keeping a ledger by the bedside, just as you might keep a journal, but with a twist. These ledgers weren't for personal reflection, they were for recording your feelings about the day and anything that might have happened to keep you awake. The goal was simple: to expel your worries onto the page before they could continue their unrelenting chase through your mind. Imagine taking a pen and just writing down whatever thoughts, anxieties, or distractions were preventing you from sleeping. It's almost as if the act of writing down your unease would somehow unburden the soul, as though the paper itself could absorb your anxiety. As you lie there in the quiet room, the image of that ledger comes back to you. You imagine it sitting on the bedside table, pages waiting patiently for you to jot down your thoughts. It's tempting, in a way, to think that such a simple method might help. After all, the ritual of writing things down, of putting a tidy end to your thoughts, could bring a small bit of order to the chaos. And perhaps, for the Victorians, it did. Perhaps, in their overstructured world, the comfort of writing down their anxieties was the closest thing to closure they could find before sleep. But then again, maybe it was all part of the same larger problem. Sleep wasn't just about the body's need for rest, it was about the mind's need for closure, for calm, for order. The Victorian obsession with routine, with ritual, was not just about bringing the body into balance, it was about bringing the world itself into balance. The same world that was, to them, rapidly spinning out of control. And somewhere in that, you feel the weight of their worry. Could it be that the night was more than just an absence of light? Could it be that the restless minds of the past were simply reflecting their times? You feel your eyelids growing heavier again, the dim light from the gas lamp flickering quietly, now casting strange shadows across the room. You wonder how many others, in the history of sleepless nights, felt the same pull toward the bed, the same yearning for peace, the same failure to achieve it. Perhaps the bed is not just for sleep. Maybe it is for the constant tension between wanting rest and fearing the uncertainty of sleep itself. But you try again. The rituals have been done, the bath, the drink, the ledger, or whatever your version of it might be. The room is quiet. The clock ticks. The mind, it seems, is momentarily still. As you lie there, with the weight of the night settling in, the promise of rest remains on the horizon, a quiet shadow in the distance. The quest for sleep continues, not with a sharp push, but with a gentle surrender. The night deepens, and the more you settle into it, the more it seems to embrace you in that peculiar, weightless way it always does, as though it is both everywhere and nowhere at once. The hours stretch on, but the darkness doesn't feel like an enemy anymore. It's simply here, quiet and insistent, like an old friend who waits patiently for you to speak, though you're not quite ready to engage. You've tried everything by now, haven't you? The warm baths, the quiet room, the soothing scents, and the gentle drink. You've tried the ledger, the routine, even the softest of rituals designed to make your body believe it is ready for sleep. And yet, sleep itself still remains just beyond your grasp, like a distant memory or a fleeting dream. As you lie there in the stillness, you realize that sleep, like so many things in the Victorian era, was not just a physical need, but a moral one. It wasn't enough to simply rest, you had to deserve rest. Sleep was linked to self-discipline, a form of personal order in a world that was becoming increasingly chaotic. You can almost hear the quiet murmurs of old Victorian voices, admonishing one another to behave before bed, to prepare their minds and bodies for the calm that would come. It's not just about sleep, it's about what sleep represents: a moral, a duty, a restoration of balance to a person who has, perhaps, been a little too absorbed by the hustle and bustle of the waking world. And in that, you feel the weight of 1,000 expectations that were placed on those who struggled with sleeplessness. To be awake was not just a problem, it was a failure. You can almost picture yourself, Victorian era and dressed in the finest linen, sitting before a doctor's desk, explaining your sleepless nights with no more than a sigh. The doctor, ever so concerned, would nod, perhaps scribbling something down in a notebook. "You must try harder," they would say, "keep your routine, calm your nerves. Make sure you have a quiet mind before bed." The notion that sleep was an issue of moral and mental fortitude is as exhausting as the sleeplessness itself. But what if they were wrong? What if it wasn't just about discipline and control? What if, in the end, the battle with insomnia was less about trying to sleep and more about surrendering to the process, accepting that rest might not come when you wanted it, but when your body truly allowed it? The wind outside shifts, the night growing even quieter. Somewhere, in another room, you might hear the faintest sound of a clock ticking, but here, in this room, everything feels as if it's frozen. The relentless ticking of time in the background seems to mock you in the stillness. You notice the way your mind, too, is ticking, thought after thought, moment after moment, moving without pause. Historians still debate whether the obsession with sleep during the Victorian era, with all its methods and theories, was a genuine attempt to restore health, or a reflection of societal anxiety. After all, the Victorians were living through a time of intense industrialization. The world was changing at a pace they could hardly keep up with. Factories, railroads, telegraphs, their world was speeding up, and it wasn't a pace the human body had evolved to match. Sleep became an escape, a place to rest both the body and the increasingly anxious mind. It was no longer just about physical rest, it was about reclaiming control in a world that seemed to move too fast. You lie still, letting the quiet envelop you, the world outside just a faint echo now. It's almost as though the silence of the night holds a kind of comfort, something the rituals never could. The bath didn't bring peace, nor did the tea or the carefully constructed routines. Yet, in the quiet, in the stillness, there is something softer, something closer to surrender than effort. You're no longer trying to sleep. You're simply here, with the promise of sleep waiting somewhere in the distance, taking its own time. As you breathe in, you can feel the weight of your body on the mattress, the sheets soft against your skin, but not quite enough to pull you into the deep sleep that awaits. Perhaps it doesn't matter anymore. Perhaps this is enough, this quiet moment of rest without expectation, this slow drift into a place where time no longer matters. What is it, you wonder, that finally brings sleep? Is it the absence of thought, or the gentle acceptance of the night's rhythms? Historians still argue whether the mind's refusal to let go was the true enemy, or if it was the relentless drive of the modern world that kept people awake in the first place. The Victorians couldn't quite answer that question, and neither can you. But as you lie there, breathing in rhythm with the night, you start to feel it, the slow, gentle pull toward rest. Perhaps it's not something to conquer after all. Perhaps sleep, like everything else, simply requires patience. And so you wait. You wait in the quiet darkness, where the clock ticks softly, where the night wraps itself around you. Sleep is no longer a battle, but a surrender to the natural world, the world that, for all its promises, can never be fully tamed. You let go. The night, as quiet as it has become, seems almost to hold its breath. Time slips by unnoticed, as it does when sleep is close, yet still remains just shy of reach. You shift your position slightly, not out of discomfort, but from the awareness that the body has begun its long, slow slide into restfulness. The warmth of the bed is no longer merely physical. It feels as though your very bones are beginning to soften in the quiet of the room. But still, the sleep you've been waiting for is not yet here, like a visitor who arrives at the very edge of your awareness but stops just before the door opens fully. Perhaps it's the stillness that makes it so difficult to distinguish between wakefulness and sleep. There is no sharp dividing line, only a gradual fade, like light slipping softly from day into night. The edges blur, and your thoughts begin to scatter, like small particles caught in the current of a slow-moving river. Thoughts drift in and out, memories of the day, worries about tomorrow, and yet, none of them seem to have enough weight to pull you from this moment. The room feels suspended in time, neither here nor there, like a forgotten hour that doesn't quite belong. You remember the odd way the Victorians spoke of sleep, their belief in its delicate balance, the idea that sleep was a fragile creature that needed to be coaxed and nurtured, never rushed. They had so many theories, so many remedies, so many rules about how to find rest. And yet, they knew that no matter how hard they tried, sleep could not be forced. It had to be invited, allowed to come on its own terms. Even the gentlest of rituals could not guarantee its arrival. The Victorian approach to sleep is full of irony. On one hand, it was a time of rigid schedules and strict routines. People were expected to rise at a precise hour, sleep at a precise hour. The demands of the industrial age had created a need for order, for productivity, for efficiency. But on the other hand, sleep was still seen as something sacred, something personal, something that couldn't be rushed or perfected with the same certainty as a clock's ticking hands. The idea that rest could be a moral imperative, that it was a symbol of personal order and well-being, was deeply ingrained. It's almost as if the Victorians believed that the very act of getting a good night's sleep could restore the fabric of a person's character. If you slept well, you were thought to be disciplined, virtuous, well-balanced. If you didn't, well, it was almost as though you had failed a moral test, a small but important part of your self-control slipping into disorder. But perhaps it wasn't always the mind or body that needed adjusting. Perhaps the very expectation of sleep, of finding perfect rest at the right time, in the right way, was part of the problem. The pressure to perform sleep, to treat it as an achievement rather than a natural rhythm, has its own ironic consequences. The more you chase it, the further it seems to run. You can feel it now. The pull of sleep is subtle, like the gentle tug of a current pulling you under. The world outside the window is no longer as sharp, and the ticking of the clock, though still present, is no longer as insistent. You wonder for a moment if this is how the Victorians felt, this slow realization that sleep was not something to be controlled, but something that would come on its own, when the time was right. In this quiet room, with the cool air brushing against your skin, you let go of the thought that you must sleep. It becomes, in this moment, less important than the experience of being here, of resting, of allowing your mind to finally quiet. Historians still argue whether the Victorian approach to sleep, those endless rituals, the constant adjustments, the fear of wakefulness actually helped people sleep better, or if it merely contributed to the very anxiety they sought to soothe. Was the obsession with sleep a self-fulfilling prophecy? Were people made more restless by their belief that sleep was an unattainable goal? It's a question that remains unanswered, just like the mysteries of the night that continue to elude those who chase them. You feel yourself drifting again. The bed feels softer, the sheets warmer, and the quiet room seems to be folding around you. Perhaps this is the moment you've been waiting for, the moment when everything simply fades away, and sleep slips in like a forgotten guest. No grand gestures, no sudden change. Just the slow surrender, the gradual release of everything you've held onto during the long hours of the night. And in that moment, you realize that sleep is not something that can be achieved, nor is it something to be fixed. It is simply a natural part of the rhythm of life, sometimes elusive, sometimes fleeting, but always coming when the body is ready to accept it. You let go of the need to control, to force, to expect. You let the night be what it is, and in doing so, you drift into rest. The room is still, the world outside is quiet, and sleep finally wraps itself around you like a soft blanket, pulling you under gently, peacefully, and without effort.